Hi there, this is Joanne Dennison, CMP, welcoming you to another episode of Sit in the Attendees Chair. So glad to have you join us today, whether you're walking, running, driving, cooking, or maybe sitting out in the sun, listening. But either way, no matter what you're doing, so glad you took the time to jump on and give a listen. Today, I have a great guest who I actually know pretty well, who's here most of the time when we record these, and that is Pauline. And if you heard some of the past episodes, we talked about how Pauline was going to be gone for a month or so, and how we were going to miss her. And when she came back, she was going to share with us about her trip. And to tell you a little bit, for those of you who might not know, I met Pauline in the fall of 2019 when she was a student in the Boston University School of Hospitality Administration and chose to take the elective that I taught on meetings and events. And now we're thrilled to say she works with us, and we truly appreciate that. But Pauline is from France, and even though she's lived over here about 6 years now, primarily, she's going to share with us about her trip home. I wanted to talk to her about what travel was like, et cetera, et cetera. So, Pauline, glad to have you here always, but even more so today. So, why don't you tell them your name, and I believe it's Choquet. Am I pretty accurate?
Pauline Choquet. Yeah.
Okay. It's never going to sound as good coming from me. I know that. And before we forget him, also we have in the room
Steve the Great.
So Steve's here too, and we'll try to make sure he doesn't, harass the two of us too much, and he'll jump in.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. So anyway, you left the first week of July. If I remember right, because you were going home for Bastille Day, among other things, right?
Yes.
Why don't you tell them what Bastille Day is?
So it's one of the main events of the Revolution.
French Revolution.
French
people.
Revolution, yes. Mainly when people who were leading the revolution raided the main prison in Paris to take all the weapons and, go attack the government and monarchy and all that. So...
Another pretty typical revolution story,
Yeah.
Just different country, pretty much. So would you say July 14th is your equivalent to our July 4th?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a very big holiday. Fireworks, usually everywhere, not so much for the past 2 years, but very big. People usually get almost everyone gets the day off unless they're in a, touristy area for the summer. Then it's more business, so everybody stays open, but most people have it off.
Very cool. So she left the beginning of July when things were in pretty good shape over here in the U.S. Most states had lifted most of their mandates in terms of mask and where you could be, assuming you were vaccinated. Things were looking pretty bright and cheerful on that particular week. And then you came home the second week of August, I think it was.
Second, yeah.
Second week of August. So what I'd like you to share, because a lot of us haven't been traveling and definitely not international. Let me talk about, well, first of all, obviously your passport is French, right? So I want to put that out there because obviously her experiences going into France could have been slightly different than those of us carrying another country's passport. So tell us about the actual trip over there. What did you find when you left out of Boston, I assume, out of Logan? And were you able to fly directly?
Yes, I flew directly.
To Paris? To Paris, okay. And what airline, out of curiosity?
Air France.
Air France, okay.
What airport did you land at?
Charles de Gaulle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
Or as we would say, Charles de Gaulle. Because we can...
Is that what she said? Say that again.
Charles de Gaulle.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I thought I'd make sure they knew that's what we would call it in American English. So what was it like at Logan when you got there? What did you find different? I mean, I know you had flown home, I guess, over Christmas and everything.
Yes.
So what did you see different compared to Christmas, compared to 2 years ago? Tell us what you saw.
Well, I'll say very empty.
Really?
Yes. So I remember flying, I think I flew 3 times since COVID. First was like in March of 2020. That was pretty empty because, it was when warnings were out. I went home for spring break and then ended up staying in France for 6 months. And then flew over Christmas, which was surprisingly busy, Christmas of 2020. I'm assuming it's because of all the students were going home. It was a very young population in the airport. It looked like a lot of students going home for Christmas and holidays. And then I was expecting kind of that for July, but it was just dead. There was like
Really?
3 flights after me. That's it. After mine, which is at 5 p.m. So, when you're in front of the TV looking at all the flights, usually there's like a full TV of it
Yeah.
around 5 p.m. There's still enough coming out. There was only 3 flights. All of the duty-free were closed. Most restaurants inside the terminal were closed other than like Starbucks and I think.
Yeah, I think most of them are only allowed to have like the walk-ups. They're not
Yeah.
able to have any of the sit-downs open. I know a lot of places.
Mhm.
And that was true in July when we were at our, quote, best, maybe. And it was still like that. Wow.
I
So
mean-
in March, when you went for spring break and you ended up staying
But
longer, then you could.
a year and a half ago.
a year and a half. Oh, but that wasn't because you couldn't come back because of COVID.
Yeah.
Oh, it was because
Yeah,
of
it
that.
was
Yeah.
because of that.
So you ended up spending 6 months, but you were in school then.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's when everything was transitioning online and all
Okay.
that.
Well, and you postponed your graduation, right?
I did, yes.
Because you couldn't do an internship in the no,
You-
your classes were supposed to be 2020. Your internship was supposed to be the fall.
The summer of 2020.
Yeah.
So, everything was kind of closed. So
Not a lot of room for anything. Yeah.
So we did our internships in the fall instead.
Okay.
Which even then some of us weren't even able to come back. I know a student who was in Taiwan, she wasn't allowed to come back in until like November or something like that.
Oh, in our class?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, her and her husband got back over. Remember what she
Mhm.
messaged me when she got back over? Yeah.
Crazy time.
Crazy time. So, still, first week of July, when we were at some of our best,
Yeah.
health-wise and optimism-wise, it was that empty.
Yes. I was surprised. Honestly, I was surprised because that's the emptiest I've seen it.
It's
And
kind of
you know-
scary, isn't it?
A little bit like, what am I doing here?
Why isn't there anyone else here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I crazy for going home?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of what it was feeling like. But the flight to Paris was full. Mostly French people going home for the summer.
And probably people being very polite because they were French. You didn't have anyone standing up slugging flight attendants or, any other horrible actions that we're seeing.
No, but I also never had that in general.
Yeah,
I don't think
again,
so.
Air France. That's one of the reasons I asked what airline it was. Yeah, I really haven't seen any stories except on American Airlines by primarily Americans of the ugliness. Kind of sad. So, okay, so now, did they feed you?
Yes, they did. It's slightly different. Everything comes in prepackaged meals, which usually Air France like opens the trays for you and everything.
Yeah.
They like to do fancy service. They don't, a lot of the time they'll come with like bottles of water and give you water throughout the flight and all that. They don't do that as much, so they really try to not have the crew travel as much. They also ask you to not travel, don't
Get
go
up
to the
and walk up and
bathroom
down.
every 5 minutes, or
Stretch your legs walking up and down the aisle. And
you can't really do that. I mean, you can't. They're not
What's
gonna.
that, about an 8-hour flight?
5.5.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, heck.
It was
That's
quick.
close.
We had a lot of wind apparently, so it was even faster than what usually is.
well, and you probably were able to take off from the runways faster because there were less flights.
Mhm.
I know that has had a huge impact on time. Now, you all were required to wear your mask, obviously, leaving the U.S. Were you allowed to? Did you keep them on the whole flight? Did everyone?
Yes, you have to keep it on the whole flight.
Okay.
Unless when they serve your meal.
They serve alcohol.
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, they still do.
Well, some of the American Airlines,
Have stopped.
excuse me, some of the United States Airlines, I don't want it to be confused with American Airlines. Some of the United States Airlines have started serving alcohol again, and a lot of them haven't because of the problems that have been going on. So, would you feel? I mean, overall, it was a good flight.
Yeah.
I mean, the main probably difference would have been the mask.
It's really the only thing that was different. Is it annoying to wear a mask for 5.5 hours on a flight? You know, when you already get pretty dehydrated. Yeah, but it's worth it.
Yep.
It's not the end of the world.
Yep.
It keeps everybody safe. So
Yep. Yep. No, totally understand. And it sounds like everyone was very compliant too.
yeah.
Again, can't help but think part of it was culture.
Which also Air France, you're required to wear a surgical mask. The
Instead of the cloth ones.
washable ones, yeah, you're not allowed to wear them. And if you don't have one, they'll give you one when you enter the
I
plane.
noticed that a couple of the airlines are doing that. No more. Actually, there's apparently a lot of places now going to no cloth mask. You have to wear, some version of surgical or the N95s or whatever they are. So that's interesting. So what happened when you got to the airport in Paris?
Well, customs are different. It used to be that there's lines depending on what type of passport you have. So there's a priority line for French passport, there's one for European passports, and there's one for everywhere else.
Oh, okay. So there's like a line for anyone else in the EU, anyone who owns a passport from any other EU country. That's interesting.
But not since COVID, because that's how it was still like this until like a few months ago, but they changed the rules for travel back in June, and they divided countries in three levels of, COVID.
Red, yellow, green.
So there's red, yellow, green. So that's how you were divided, and that depends on where you're coming from, not necessarily where your passport is from. So I was on the same line as like a Canadian person, American person.
Interesting. But I could see why they would do that. That's actually good thinking, I'm sure.
Yeah, because depending on which country you come from, the health requirements are different. So which they didn't actually ask for my vaccination status when I arrived in France. They ask all that before your takeoff, which I thought was kind of weird, but
No, because apparently that's what they're doing. They don't want to get you on the plane. So
Yeah.
let's back up to that. I forgot to ask that. So tell me, when you booked your flight, did you have to do anything to show your vaccine status? Or before you even got to the airport, did you have to show anything?
no.
Okay, so when you got to the airport, what did you have to do?
Well, you have to go to the check-in luggage area.
Okay.
They don't give
Can't
you
do
the
online pass. Okay.
They don't do it anymore. They did it for me, but they didn't do it for Kyle, my boyfriend, who has an American passport, and I'm not sure why. We're still trying to figure that out.
Maybe that's exactly why, though.
Yeah, maybe because they don't want, they want French people to be able to go home no matter what. I don't know, but I had to drop off luggage anyway, so that's when they asked for my vaccination card or a negative test of less than 72 hours.
Now, you had your vaccines when you were in France, right?
No, I had it done here in the U.S.
You did have it done here. And because different countries have different vaccines, is that an issue?
It is.
I was thinking of that the other night. I was like, I wonder how that works.
Vaccines in France are mostly Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca, which I don't know if we have in the U.S.
It's been
it's
pending
another
approval.
name.
I don't think it's gone through yet.
So I made sure to take Moderna because that was the first one that was approved in France. But for example, there's people who live in China and Russia. I know it's a big issue because their vaccines are not
right. The one
authorized by the
Chinese one
EU
has
yet.
been real. Yeah.
So there's
So they may consider you not vaccinated.
Exactly.
So France has, and I'm assuming other countries, has recognized vaccines. So it doesn't matter where you got the vaccine. It matters which vaccines you have, and does it meet them. So that was okay. So you had to show proof or a test, which obviously you had a card or something, or a picture of a card or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
The CDC card works for that. I also did the test just in case. I don't want to travel if I'm sick.
Now, out of curiosity, so I've read one of the things I wanted to bring up later was this whole EU, what do they call it?
The health pass.
The EU digital COVID certificate. So IATA, the International Association of Travel, I always screw it up. what it is. They came out the other day and said that the EU digital COVID certificate should be the model for the rest of the world. That it's that's good. It solves all the problems, et cetera, et cetera. Even though you had it done over here, can you get an EU digital certificate?
You can now. They launched all
Since
that.
you're, that's your nationality.
They took a while to get that out. That was in August. So the first few weeks I was there, I didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
But they finally made some kind of tool where you can send your CDC card in, and then they'll send it to you within 72 hours.
Oh, okay.
So that was originally for French people, and then a few weeks later, they finally launched it for any person who's traveling to France.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So an American, if they have it, can get a EU digital COVID certificate.
You have to
Oh, that's interesting.
travel to France within the next month. They
Mhm.
don't really, if you're not planning on traveling to France, you can't get it yet, just
Right.
because they have so many
Right, understandable.
requests. You need to attach your passport, your vaccination card, your plane ticket, and then they'll send it to you within a few days.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And I wonder, have you been able to use that as proof here, or do you still have to show your CDC card
I haven't been
or a picture?
asked here.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet. Oh, boy.
I have my CDC card saved on my phone. I have the French one also saved.
Yeah.
The good thing is the French one is digital, so it's saved on my computer, and I can print it out as much as I want. It's not just a random scan of it.
Yeah.
So, if I lose my CDC card, it's not the end of the world, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah,
But,
yeah. Well, it was interesting. I was talking to someone the other day because I was shocked when, we got our vaccines. And for those of you who are listening, yes, Steve and I both got our vaccines
Steve the Great.
in the spring. And we do plan on getting the booster, which sounds like it will be recommended. But I was surprised that we got like this
Mhm.
card. I was like, okay, right away, my first thought is people are going to, figure out how. It's not that hard to make a copy of that. And I'm like, what the heck? I mean, how did the U.S. not think about an electronic version when we have electronic? And I was talking with someone the other day, and I think this is what hit me. Because I just kept thinking, and then when all the forgeries were coming out, I'm
Mhm.
like, no kidding. Like, why is this a shock? But I was talking to someone the other day because I kept thinking, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do it in the spring? They definitely could have made some kind of electronic thing for us to do. And this is what hit me, at least in this country. I cannot speak for any other country. Is my gut feeling is last December, January, February, March, April, it never dawned on anyone it would be an issue. We got the gift of the vaccines, and yes, I'm sorry for those of you who disagree with me. That's fine. We got the gift? Everyone assumed everyone, or primarily
Would get it.
everyone, would get it without question. So why would we need a card? Why would this even become a big
Mhm.
deal? No one, I don't think, ever could have envisioned that we would be to the point now where it's a lot, and I want to talk about this in France, where certain places in the United States, you are having to show it to go into a restaurant or to the theater or to the, no one, it was just like, we won't need it. Everyone will be vaccinated and we will finally be on the other side of this. And the thought that we would restrict people of going into things because of the vaccine would never been on our head, because we never would have thought that many people wouldn't get it.
Mhm.
So I think that's where the U.S., my gut says that's kind of what happened here. Hopefully, now that some countries have one that works, that it'll get done. So anyway, that's cool, because I was thinking about that with your vaccines, but that's interesting that I bet a lot of the French residents were not happy that they had to be lumped into a line with anyone else, or maybe they're too polite to complain. But, as opposed to
Yeah.
having just a French
Yeah.
line, like, I'm thinking from the American standpoint, I think. So you got through customs. Was there anything in particular they were looking, or just, the normal routine?
No, nothing. I mean, it's all the airline that checked
Were
all that.
they doing temperature checks, or because you had the stuff? Nope.
No.
Cool.
Again, I'm coming from a green country, so I don't know what it's like if you're coming from countries where COVID wasn't as,
Well, and this is
controlled.
it. The last week, of course, the EU now has put
Yeah.
the U.S. on. You might have a whole nother experience if you flew over there today,
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens by December when you go home for the
Mhm.
holidays, right? Mm. Okay, um, you live in an immediate Paris suburb.
Mhm.
So anything you saw different when you got there? I know you spent two different places of France primarily. So tell us about when you were in the greater Paris area. What did you see? What did you hear? And of course, one of the questions I have is not that long after you were there was when the protests started,
Mhm.
because they were requiring the proof of
Yeah.
vaccine to get into things. So talk about your time in the Paris area.
It was busy, busier than I was expecting it to be. I think, we had a lot of lockdowns in France. There's been 3 lockdowns so far.
Mm.
They're hoping that with the whole health pass and vaccination rates going up, we won't have a 4th one. Um, Lots of people were out. Everybody was dining out, you know, hanging outside with friends and all that. So it kind of felt like, I don't want to say like the Paris pre-COVID, because obviously everybody's still wearing masks and,
Right.
there's...
But there was some sense of normalcy, like hope that we were getting there.
Yeah,
You said something
definitely.
about vaccines going up. So I guess my first question is, any idea midsummer what percentage of the population in France?
I think they reached about 65% in August.
And does that include, similar to the United States, 12 and older?
Not
Are they-
yet. Not yet.
It-
They're
there's
not
all-
making it mandatory for them yet until end of
18 and older.
September,
Okay.
just because they were the last ones to be authorized to get the vaccine. So, they didn't want to make it mandatory for them when they only had
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks to get it, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it is becoming mandatory for 12 to 17 years old soon too.
So is it actually mandatory? Yeah, there's that word.
I shouldn't say that. It's not technically mandatory. The government would be very mad at me if I say that. But
Heavily suggested, recommended.
let's say if you want to go out to dinner anytime soon, if you want to go to the movies anytime soon, a concert, anything where there's other people around you, you will need it.
And that's their way of getting around making it mandatory.
Yeah.
Then you do have a choice, and we're seeing that more and more here
You
in the
do.
United States
Yeah.
too, that you have to show proof of at least one vaccine.
Yeah.
Because they figure if you get one, you will go back and get the second one. Or we won't make it mandatory, but if you want to go do all these fun things
Mhm.
that you want to do,
And some people are deciding to give up on that. I guess it's just, what do you want to do
yep.
next?
How do you want to live your life?
Yeah.
And that's your choice. Is how do you
Mhm.
want to live your life?
Yeah. There are some restrictions for certain jobs where you need to have it. So anything related to healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be
They're
vaccinated
mandating
now.
it. Okay.
If you work in a restaurant, you need to have a vaccine too. Anywhere basically where you come in contact with people a lot.
Stores also.
That's a bit of a gray area. I think it depends on what type of stores.
And what role you probably play in the
Mhm.
store. Like
Mhm.
if you're in the back, you may not have
Yeah,
to.
so for example, in restaurants, servers have to be vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
But in the kitchen, you don't have to be vaccinated because you're not coming in contact with
Hmm.
people that much. You're coming in contact with their food, so I don't really understand that. But
That's
And
the-
you know,
yeah,
I honestly don't know if it's, does it have a life on food? I don't know that. There's one I haven't thought about. I know it's airborne and everything,
yeah.
and I know about surfaces, but never thought about food.
I mean,
That's-
there's so much, food safety restrictions already.
yeah,
It's not the first virus we saw. You can have the flu and still work in a kitchen.
yeah,
It's-
true.
So I think they just go based off of that. But yeah.
So if whether you're a French citizen or a French resident with, some of the same rights and abilities, or you are a guest over there, if you want to go, my understanding is if you want to go into pretty much any museum now,
Mm-hmm.
art galleries,
Mhm.
theaters,
Mhm.
restaurants, And that's what the protests, they were probably, to me, one of the first countries that I saw starting to do that.
Yeah.
Now, again, we're talking almost 2 months ago now when all that was going on, when it first started. So the protest, of course, on the American news, you would have thought the whole city of Paris, as I
Was going
told you,
down.
was, yeah, it was Bastille Day again or something. But I've learned that, news probably in any country gives you certain filters. So what would you say the protest was the standard person in any danger? How big were the protests? Were they just in isolated areas?
So it was mostly in big cities. This is now the, I think, 8th week of protests. Last weekend it was.
Oh, so they're still going on.
They are still going on.
Little less violent, because some of the first few days were pretty violent.
Yes, less violent overall. And I think what you were saying, we talked about that earlier. In France, I don't think it seemed as violent. The news channels weren't. I think in America, it's just like there's always, if the city is, if there's protests in France, I feel like it's always portrayed as, there's fire everywhere and all this.
It is for every city, is
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I've determined.
It didn't seem as bad being in France.
Uh-huh.
Watching the news over the month, I was home. Obviously, every time there's a protest, there is going to be some violence. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the problem in France is people who aren't necessarily coming for like their convictions or just coming to create a mess and protest.
As many protests.
Yeah, that's very common. It didn't seem as violent to me watching the news in France than when I watched everything from abroad.
Okay. So still protest, and again, because of all these restrictions. You can't go anywhere unless you
Yeah.
have the vaccine.
Well, one thing I should mention is you need the health pass, which you can also get tested. If you test negative, you'll have a pass for 72 hours.
Okay.
So technically you can bypass that by getting tested every 72 hours if you want to. That's what I had to do the first few weeks when they hadn't figured out the whole transferring my CDC card over to the French system. I got tested like 5 times. Wasn't great, but you can bypass it. The tests for now are still free, but they are going to start making them, you're going to have to start paying for them starting mid-September.
And of course, I don't know if you've seen that over here in the United States, a lot of that is happening too. And some of the workplaces that are giving people the option of being vaccine or tested are not going to pay for the test.
Yeah.
Along with some of them are now increasing their health insurance.
Yes, I
figuring
saw
the
that.
person will be, boy, I'm glad I turned the Bluetooth off a minute ago. Okay. So you were able to go and do some fun things in Paris and, somewhat feel like it was
Yeah.
home and pleasant and fun. You went to restaurants, obviously, and
Yes.
I don't know if you do museums since you've seen them all probably, but
Still do.
still do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something to see. So then you headed off to the coast.
Yes, in Brittany, which is in the west part of France. Everything seems normal there too.
You said, did you take the train? You said that it's a 2-hour train, or did you all drive?
We drove.
You drove. Okay.
Yeah, we drove. I don't think we took the train at all while I was there. No.
Okay. So you drove out, and anything different out there, or?
Not really. I'll say maybe less mask wearing.
Mm-hmm.
I think just because Paris, for basically since the beginning of, well, not the beginning of COVID, the summer after COVID started, masks have been mandatory outside in the city pretty much the whole time.
Okay. And some of the
Which-
cities have done that here
Yeah.
at times. New York and Boston had it and everything for a while. Yeah.
And I think in Brittany they took off some mask mandates, when it was low tourist season.
Mm-hmm.
They brought it back over the summer, but, people coming from all parts of France don't necessarily know about all the mandates. Honestly, it's kind of hard to find them. It's not like there's, when you're entering the town, they don't have a huge sign saying you have to wear your mask. But I mean, it's not that hard. You can guess. If there's a lot of people around you, you probably should wear your mask. But, it's...
Are cases going up there because of the Delta variant and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, so you all are going through the same thing. I thought that was pretty.
Mainland is doing better than all the French islands. We know that in the French islands they're really struggling because they don't have enough hospitals or
Define French islands.
so there's a few islands that are very far from France, like Guadeloupe and all that. Is like a 11-hour flight type of thing.
Okay.
We have some in the Caribbeans as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been struggling a lot with COVID. The cases have gone up a lot. And the problem is they don't necessarily have the resources as much as, in France, mainland, if you are in a town where there's no hospital available, they'll put you on an ambulance and drive you 2 hours to the next hospital where they have all the staff and everything they need. They've been having issues with that because they just can't drive you for 2 hours and find another hospital.
Well, and a lot of the islands opened back up to people because they needed people to come visit to
And
keep
that too.
the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And your insurance in France, is it government?
Yeah.
Okay, so government, what's the word I'm looking for when it's government medical care? What's the word I'm looking for?
Subsidized or social?
No,
Social
is that word?
health? No.
There's a word. Anyway, but so it's similar to like what we know Canada has and the UK. And okay. Okay, so yeah, but the islands, you're right. You'd almost think they'd be more protected, but they were some of the first ones eventually to open up, and people flew down, and
They
here we go
rely
again.
so much on tourism that
Yep.
You want to reopen as much as you can, but that kind of
May set you back for another year.
So
Absolutely.
they've been sending military boats to build, field hospitals on boats or all that kind of
Really?
stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Have they actually sent any of the well, I guess a hospital boat would be too big for an island needing, because most of those hospital boats, military boats, are huge. So that would be too big. But okay, so, that's
They're
very
flying extra staff and all that. It's a lot. There's a long history of those islands not really feeling like they're part of France. So I think right now they're trying to help as much as they can, but it's tough when you have, when you're that far away from the country.
Yep. Yeah, because, we even go through that with Puerto Rico and Guam and some of ours. Puerto Rico's close, and many would say we haven't done a really good job, not just through COVID, but some other things taking care of them, much less the ones in the South Pacific. And we have some pretty random islands, some pretty random places. Apparently lovely, but most people would have no idea that they had anything to do with the U.S. So I can understand that. So, okay, so things were pretty nice there, pretty, casual.
Pretty normal, other than, the mask wearing. Until we finally had to show the pass, which that started August 9th, if I remember correctly.
And then you had to start showing it everywhere? Okay.
They did have the first week, a lot of places didn't ask for it because the government said, we'll give you some time to figure out
how to do
operations and all this. So the first week, really, no one asked. They didn't even bother because they knew they were not going to get fined. But eventually, you did have to show it.
That would have been the very end of your stay there, then, too, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Last week or whatever. So, Kyle, American citizen, went over about 4 weeks after you'd been over. And I'm sure he's told you some, at least, about his experiences, airport, flights, etc. Anything different by the time he went, or possibly because he has a U.S. passport? Although it sounds like the lines, I don't know. Anything you pick up different?
Apparently not that much. No, not
Okay.
very different.
Airport was still empty.
Airport was still empty. They still asked for the CDC card before boarding. We both had to file something on the plane, like a contact tracing form saying where we were going to be in the next 10 days, give us phone numbers where we can reach you and all that. So we both had to do that. He went through the same custom line I did in the green area. Very similar.
Yeah, if he had flown even 2 weeks later, it would have been with the
Probably different. Yeah.
with the change in our status with them and everything. And you all's trip back? Good?
Yes. Let me think of how we. Yeah, it was fine. We also. When did we show our card for this? I think when we boarded the plane on that one.
And again, Air France.
Yes.
Excuse me, people. And how about when you got to the U.S. and had to come back in?
So before boarding, we had to file a U.S. paper that they collected for us, saying it's like a sworn statement saying that we had been vaccinated.
And I assume
And
they had
had a
your,
test.
and they had uploaded again the card.
No, nothing was digital. It's just like a random showing of your card when you go.
But I would think they would have had it attached to your travel itinerary since you flew the same airline. And
Possibly.
everything.
Possibly.
So once you put it on, it's kind of like, global entry and
Mhm.
all those things.
Yeah.
It's attached to you forever,
Yeah.
and at least in that airline or something. So you got over here and no big deal.
Nothing.
Logan's still empty.
Logan's still empty. Yep. Nope. No line at the cab. If you want to know, it's super quick to get back.
When you said that about the airport being empty, some of you know that when the pandemic was declared, Steve and I were actually on a cruise in the Caribbean, and you're not really paying a whole lot of attention to the news. Obviously, we knew that COVID existed and everything like that, but and our cruise actually ended up being extended by 2 days because Puerto Rico decided not to let us get off there, so we had to hightail it up to Fort Lauderdale. But the day we flew back from Florida to Boston, the Fort Lauderdale airport was quite busy, probably because all the cruise ships were trying to dump people off. Plus, we happened to come back in the middle of spring break, so a lot of the students were, parents have said, you're coming back now. They'd been down there 3-4 days, and they're like, nope, you're coming back now. So it was very busy. But we connected in Newark, and that was when it kind of really began to hit me. Because Newark, like you said, all those food areas were chained up, and everything was dark. And we were there probably around 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. Newark used to be my home airport. And my first reaction was, oh my God, what happened? Like 9/11 had happened again or something. And it was just, that for me was the real moment where something's really wrong if this airport is this empty. And then we flew up to Logan, and when I got off, and it was only like 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night, which, Logan would normally be like packed, and it was just like getting off, and we were just like, oh my God, what has happened? Because we were still somewhat in the dark, as to it all. But airports empty is not something. I mean, we've seen some smaller ones empty over the years. I forget the one we took pictures of, that it was very weird. We were like the only people in a 12-gate airport. I can't remember where that was. I think it was Fort Wayne or something. It was crazy. And terrifying, to be perfectly honest. And it was just didn't have any flights. So, okay. But yeah, so, talking to your family, has anything much changed since you left? You've been back about 2 weeks, I believe, now. Anything much changed?
Not much has changed yet. Vaccines keep going up. Vaccination rates keep going up. So
Are people working from home over there if they have, like, that type of jobs?
I think less than in the U.S.
Okay.
There's a big cultural thing in France that you have to be at work for, certain hours. If really, even if you're not working, you have to be there.
Which was the U.S. up until 2 years ago, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know, it's seen, if you leave work late, even if you're not doing that much, not being that productive, is seen as better than, if you're going
that's
home when
how
you're
the
done.
U.S. has been for probably 20, 30 years,
So
come in early, leave late, even if you're not doing anything.
So people are back in person a lot.
Mask in the office, probably.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it can depend on the. Well, I'm not sure actually about that one. I think they might have removed it if you're vaccinated type of thing, or it can depend on the place.
Okay.
But I know all my family's offices, they keep their mask in for now. Unless you're in your own private office, then you're allowed to take it off. But
Okay.
the general policy seems to be you should keep it.
Any common area, you
Mhm.
need to do it. So, I've been watching what's going on with meetings and events around the area, around the world. And what do you know about in France? Like, did they have any? I'm assuming there's big festivals that are
Mhm.
held, and just like everywhere else in the summer and everything. Are they holding them? Are they postponing them, canceling them?
A lot of them have been canceled for the summer
Mhm.
and early fall, just because the new guidelines came in so late. Since the health pass was organized and mandatory, well, not mandatory, strongly encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
So since mid-August, they pretty much removed all of the caps on the amount of attendees you can have.
Outside or inside? Or
Both.
both.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can have a 3,000 person inside event.
If you require the pass, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's I had to look it up yesterday, honestly, because
Well, it changes daily, so
It-
don't feel
yeah.
bad. Don't like people like reach out to me about things in the United
Yeah.
States, and I'm like, first of all, every state is different, so start there. So
So there is if you're in a private house and you want to have a huge family gathering with hundreds of people, you can. You don't need to ask proof of vaccination or a negative test. But if it's anywhere in like a public venue that has been rented, or
okay, a hotel, a
a hotel,
castle,
a castle,
y-
a town hall, that type of
museum.
stuff. Actually, town hall, no, I'll talk about that in a minute. All that, you need to have the team of the owner of the venue to check for the health passes.
Okay.
And the venue is responsible for that. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Oh wow, that's
Not
a
the
big
clients.
that's
Yeah.
big difference in the United
Yeah.
States, where it's like the meeting and event planners who are responsible for checking all that.
And that's because not everyone is allowed to ask for your pass. That's, I can't just go to someone, say, okay, you're coming to my birthday, you need to show me your pass. You can't just do that. So it needs to be someone who is allowed to ask for it, which anyone who's affiliated to a venue is allowed to ask for it, but not the planner itself.
That's interesting,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I'm sure many planners listening to this are like, oh, I wish they'd do that over here, so I didn't have to be responsible. And all the venues are going, oh, thank goodness that's not us.
Yeah. And then there are two exceptions of venues where you're not required to ask a pass. Is town halls and any worship area, so
Okay.
churches and temples and all that.
They're not allowed, they don't have to require it, or they're not allowed to ask, or both.
I don't know if they're not allowed to ask.
Mm-hmm. But they can't require it.
I don't think they can.
Town
think
hall,
that's
I
what it
can
is.
see any kind of government building where you might have to do business.
Yeah, and places of worship, I'm not sure. It's something about the Constitution that makes it that you can't prohibit people from entering these places.
Separation of church and
Mhm.
state, probably.
Yeah.
Church and government. Interesting.
So, religious weddings, you can have as many people as you want. You don't need to require it. And actually, the minimum, for places like private venues, if you have less than 50 attendees, you don't need to require it either.
What about things like, here we go. I'm always willing to show my ignorance. I need to travel more, which is the goal. So sports over here,
Mhm.
obviously this has been a big issue, and the state to state has changed. So your big outdoor sports over there, I assume, would be football, soccer,
Mhm.
European, what we call soccer, what you call football. And what about those stadiums? Same thing? They have to show proof?
Yes.
Or is soccer season over? I'm sorry. It's football season over. Don't know yourself. Okay.
I am not a big. I don't think it's over. No, I don't think it's over.
I don't think it is either.
I don't think it is.
I'm not sure. I've never figured out when it's ever over. It seems like someone's always doing something.
Yeah.
It's like, and here's this, and here's this. And it's like they must play 12 months a year. which is fine. There's probably indoor and outdoor or something like that. What are other outdoor sports that would be in large arenas?
Tennis is pretty big in France.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, the French Open.
Rugby.
Did they require them for the French Open?
The French Open did not have attendees.
It was one of the ones that didn't. Okay.
Because it was back in
June?
I never know. I think it's early June, which was right out of another lockdown. So.
And that was right. Because it was a couple of weeks before the Olympics
Mhm.
and everything. Okay, so no. Well, that took care of that, didn't it?
Mhm.
And what were the others you said are big?
Rugby,
Okay.
which I don't know when is in season either. I'm not
Okay.
big on sports.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And what about indoor sports? So as we go indoor, I mean, what indoor sports? You don't do basketball, really?
We do
Not
a little bit.
Yeah, but not that's going to be bringing 15,000 people in, probably, I'm guessing.
Handball is pretty big.
What
You
is
probably don't do a whole lot of baseball. Some, but
No, baseball.
baseball?
non-existent?
No. Okay.
No one would know what
Um,
that is. No, I'm kidding. People
What
know
about-
what it is.
what
People
about
don't understand
cricket?
it.
Cricket. Is
Oh
cricket?
no, I don't think so.
No, no.
That's British.
Lacrosse, no.
Rugby.
No, I'm trying to think of what else would be inside. I'm thinking over here it's hockey, basketball.
Worldwide Wrestling Federation.
I don't think so in France. I'm really thinking no. So maybe not a lot of indoor winter sports where you all are going to have to worry about this, really.
Probably not. And I'm assuming if we do, then they'll do the same type of thing as festivals and concerts and
Yeah.
trade shows.
Yeah,
and
because
all
the
that.
concerts are probably who are in a lot of those. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, so we're giving you all things to think about in terms of, and some of you may be looking ahead to planning meetings in France, or some of you may have even had some on the books for the next 6 months, which will be interesting when a lot of your people may not even be able to get there, but we'll talk about that at some point. So, but one of the conversations we had before we got on to record, that I really think that meeting and event planners need to know, we were discussing vacation. And I was saying how yesterday I had just read, something where they were saying, some European said their friend was so excited because they'd gotten 10 days vacation for their new job. And they're like, 10 days, we get 5.6 weeks. And Pauline was telling us about vacation in Europe. And well, I'll let her tell that, and then I'll tell you why I think it pertains to you. So go ahead.
So in France, it's pretty common that people get 5 weeks plus holidays, which a lot of holidays in France happen in May. There was like 4 around that time.
What? Do you all do May Day?
May 1st.
Yeah, May Day.
That's our.
What do you call it?
That's our Labor Day
Okay.
type of day. May 8th.
Is
Um,
something
Oh,
that you get a
something
day off?
historical about a war. Don't ask me which. I really should know that. I just know I don't have a school.
Oh, I want to say it's probably.
I think it's World War One.
End of one of the big battles.
Um,
Steve, look at May 8th in France.
I'll bet on the end of World War One, but
Could be either one.
it could be either one. And then we have the Ascension. No, je dis l'Ascension. Yeah, like a Thursday of the Ascension, which it depends on the year, but
Okay.
it's usually around May. So
And that's
yeah.
a Christian holiday, I assume.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do Christian holidays. in
Is that the
France.
official religion? Does France have an official religion?
No, technically not.
Yeah.
Because church and state.
But it's given off.
It's
I
given
guess
off.
like Christmas.
May the
Yeah.
8th is Victory Day, marks the formal acceptance by the Allies of Nazi Germany's surrender in 1945, ending World War II in Europe.
Okay, well,
Okay.
that was close
Very
enough.
good.
Yeah, no,
It's
no.
one of the world wars.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised that it's not more talked about in the U.S.
Well, we talk about, is that the one? No, that wouldn't be what we call, because we have VJ Day and well, anyway. yeah,
Hopefully, there's no historian listening to
No,
this
the sad thing
podcast.
is I am a U.S. history, American studies major, and
That is sad.
I never did do well on wars. I think that probably says a lot about me. Culture, anything else, how people were living at home during the wars, that I'm good on. Wars themselves, not so good. Tend to want to shy away from them a lot. so May has a lot of holidays. Good to know. But then what happens over the next couple months?
Then there's summer break, where a lot of people will take 2 weeks, or 3, depending on how much they can take. But basically, offices between Bastille Day and August 15th, which is also a holiday.
So July 14th to August 15th, we're talking here.
Not a lot of people work. Not a lot of offices are open, which means not a lot of stores are open in more residential areas. Yeah. Restaurants also.
And when you say
closed.
stores, you're not talking about clothing stores or department stores. You said even like the local
Your local butcher
butcher.
shop will be closed. The bakery across from my house was closed. I know, right? Bakery closed. Yeah.
Now we know why she lives in a building with flour in the basement, right? For those of you who don't know, flour is FLOUR is a big bakery, Joanne Chan's bakery in Boston, and there's one in the building. That's it. You picked your apartment by
Maybe
the bakery.
that probably helped a lot.
I don't blame you. Been to that exact one a number of times. So basically, a lot of the country shuts down for everyone to go on holiday.
Pretty much, yeah.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
It sounds like a wonderful idea.
Well, except for, touristy areas, because of course that's the busy season for example, in Brittany, everything is open. I was going to say 24/7, but no, 7 days a week, which is already pretty big in France. That really happens.
So it's really the metropolitan areas and the immediate suburbs is where, except the metropolitan areas where tourists hang out, there might be a little more. Be interesting to know if like 20 years ago, if that was even those closed down too, I know you wouldn't know, but the reason she and I were talking about this, and I told her a story about 15 years ago about talking to a meeting planner, and they'd gotten all these great rates for their meeting, and I think it was France. I don't think it was another part of Europe, and they got over there and everything was closed. I mean, their hotel was open, they could do the meeting, but everything else, restaurants, shops, everything. And this is, of course, why they got the really good hotel rate. But they didn't know, because most of us in the U.S. don't know that it closes down for a month, basically. So it's just something I remember being told, this is something you need to think about when you plan meetings in a lot of Europe. And I think, a lot of areas, I'm guessing every country or areas of certain countries, because I remember going to, where was I? Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. And it turned out it was Easter week. That's not why we were down there. Well, they close everything. Everyone is off. Work is off. Schools are closed, starting with, I guess it was the week before, like the Friday before Palm Sunday. And so everyone's off for like 10 days. And we didn't know that. We were going down for a destination wedding, and got down there. I mean, fortunately, we were at, a beautiful resort. The wedding was at another beautiful resort. We weren't really affected, but to find out, nope, that's closed. Nope, that's closed. Didn't affect us, but boy, it had to have affected a lot of people. It just really did. And I remember certain things in Thailand, them telling me certain times of the years where that's it, it's closed. I mean, when they say it's a national holiday, it's a national holiday. It's not like, oh yeah, and if you go at 6 a.m. you can get great sales at the store. It's actually a holiday. Nothing gets opened. So I think that's just something for people to be aware of, whether they're personally traveling or they're setting up a meeting. Anything else you can think of that you want to share from that angle?
Let me see on my little notes. I think we pretty much hit everything that I thought about.
Sounds exciting to me. I'm ready to jump on Air France.
And go
It's
over.
a good airline.
Oui.
Yeah, it's got a good reputation, that's for sure. And I was just so curious. I'm always curious to compare airlines that are not from the United States. When I started flying to Thailand and flew Air Nippon, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like such a totally different experience. And of course, U.S. was very much in the minority on it, which was wonderful, actually. If you're going to take a gazillion-hour flight, nice to only, and it was just the flight attendants and just the care, like you said, they they had different colored aprons for different things and how they handled the food, and it was just like, huh. But this is how it was in the U.S. at some point. But we've driven it to what's a cheap ticket, and that's the most important thing. Which is, we'll see. Some things I wanted to share, kind of tagged on with this, is a recent report came out by Freeman. They paired with a company that most of us would not know their name, that is experts in tracking and collecting data, collecting and tracking data, whatever, on things like disease and everything. And they produced a report. It's out in many of the publications. You can find the link to it, or a summary of it, which is probably better to read, about the safety of being at in-person events. And basically what the report came to be, and I guess this isn't truly a surprise, is in a controlled environment, face-to-face events are safer, they said, even than going to the grocery store, going shopping, anything like that, because of course they're not checking your vaccine status when you go into a store, but they are at a lot of, and they were saying, again, controlled events. So these would be the events that are asking, similar to what Pauline just said, for proof of vaccine or test or whatever. I believe that. I know why they're doing it. I understand. Do I think it's going to make a huge difference in what happens in the next 6 months? No. Or next 4 months? I really don't, because we're going to run into the problem with, a lot of things. Again, the travel itself, people just being overall scared. As we were watching these numbers skyrocket. This morning, what did I say? It said there were 400 million cases total now in the U.S. and 4 million have been in the past 4 weeks. And, struggling with the Delta variant and now the other variant, which I'm going to pronounce Mu. It's a Greek letter, and you saw how well I translated Charles de Gaulle. So, but there's going to be a lot going on the next few months. Again, and I'm sure that's not a surprise to any of you. We're watching things get canceled. One of the ones last week was, the NRA canceled their big annual convention in Texas, which I just thought was ironic on a gazillion different levels. But, for any association, no matter how you feel about the NRA or others, for any association to cancel their annual meeting is huge, because that is one of their primary revenue generators. And the fact that they chose it was going to be held in Texas and it was canceled, just adds other dimensions. Fancy Food Show, which is a huge show in New York City, put on by the Specialty Food Association, that brings in somewhere around 25,000 people into the city and held at Javits. They closed it. They actually are taking the exhibit online. It might have been going to be, hybrid for that anyway, but they've canceled the in-person. And Fancy Food Show, because I actually worked for a gourmet food store at one point when I lived in New Jersey, and that's how I learned what the Fancy Food store was. It's where people who own, gourmet food stores and everything, they go and they look for new products that are coming up to sell or serve, and their restaurants are packing the gift boxes or whatever it would be. It's a really, really big deal. It brings in people worldwide. For both, so for it to be canceled is a really big deal. There's something which I'd never heard of called Bravocon, which is a big. Did you know about this?
Yeah, I'm ashamed of it.
You watch Bravo, I take it then.
Yeah.
So Bravo, the TV station, can it be called a TV station? Anyway, Bravo has its own convention. apparently, with all, its celebrities and its shows, and so its fans can come. That got canceled in the past week or 10 days, and it wasn't going to even be till mid October. And it brings in about 10,000 people. Um, we're seeing the cancellations, and a lot of things go online. Oh, back to the fancy food show for a minute. I know Steve's over there thinking, "Wow,
Steve the Great.
if they took their exhibit hall online, the tax implications."
Yeah.
And if you don't know about that, go listen to the tax podcast about how if you're doing an online trade show, it has significant tax implications. But I'm watching people also meeting planners. It's really weird. I've had so many conversations in the past couple of weeks with planners where a city changed their requirements. And so then there was talk about moving it out of that city to another city, and it was only like a week away. You've got to be reading the news. If you have meetings scheduled face to face in the next couple months, you need to track what that city and state is doing. Yes, it is your job. If you're the meeting planner, you really need to know this. So if you do need to, go to someplace else, you have as much time as possible. Plus, you can take it to your stakeholders and say, we need to be aware of this. Talked to someone where their organization had big incentive program outside of the United States, moved it to an in the United States location, and it still ended up getting canceled because that state ended up changing its requirements, like after people were already on site. We've got to be aware of this. We have to be on top of it. There was something else, and of course, did I write it down? I had it a minute ago, and then I did. We've got to be aware of this. I think you need to be ready if you're having any kind of face-to-face meeting to. I'm not going to use that P word. I hate that P word. But you need to be ready to change it to a virtual meeting or be willing to cancel it. In the next couple of months, we are going to be seeing this. It shouldn't be a surprise to you as you watch the numbers going up. And, as Pauline said, the islands for France are short beds. We've got places throughout the United States. There's places around the world. We're seeing our status change going into other countries. Other countries' status is changing coming into ours. And different states are doing different things. There was another one I was going to tell you. Shoot, forget what it was. But anyway, just be looking ahead. Assume right now that the next, again, it's the first week of September. I'd say through November, December, we're going into a different version of last year. In some ways, it will be better. We're more prepared. We know what to do. In some ways, it could potentially be worse for things probably a lot of us aren't directly involved in terms of the medical world. But you got to be ready. And let's hope by next year we will be able to say things are good. Shoot, there were many points, but I'm not going to remember them now. So, Miss Pauline, anything you would like to share about anything that we didn't talk about?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. And FTG over there.
Steve the Great. She always hesitates because she never knows what I'm going to say. But y'all tell Mom and then listen up.
I have no idea where he's coming up with
We'll
that
leave
one.
the light on for you.
So, no, that's a hotel.
Without meeting space.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they use that tagline anymore, that hotel. Most of them wouldn't even know that was a hotel tagline a million years ago. Anyway, so thank you. Hopefully, I'm sure you found things that Pauline shared with us. We have not been on an airplane since we got back on March 17th of 2020. Our choice, not saying you shouldn't, for a variety of reasons, we felt the first 15, actually we thought we were going to travel this past summer and it didn't work out. And now we figure it's probably going to be another 6 months before we're on airplanes. But, just be informed, make the best decisions, and we need to remember that this industry is really not going to come back the way we think it will for a long time. And the sooner everyone does what they need to do to make this better, the sooner people will be back to work and going to face-to-face meetings. So hope that is something to keep in mind. So Pauline, thank you very much for sharing all about your trip.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. Steve, thanks for being here. Oh, and in fact, it doesn't really matter because by the time you hear it, it won't matter, but it's Steve's birthday today.
It is.
39.
Happy birthday, Steve.
Well, thank you. It's good being 39.
You remember that? That was a
No,
long time ago.
not really.
Been a few years. Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't know Steve when he was 39, so he didn't know me when I was 39. So, but yes, so happy birthday, Steve. Thanks for spending it today in here with us. And we appreciate you listening as always. And thank you so much. And hope you find it interesting, entertaining. Things coming up soon. Keep an eye out for whenever the upcoming class is. I know you'll all be listening to this at different times. For those of you who have taken my class before, don't forget the Take Again option. And for those of you who know anyone who may be considering doing their CMP, I hope you choose to check out what the class schedule is and everything. Probably a couple other things, but we won't talk about those right now. Thanks so much. Look forward to being with you on the next episode. Take care.